Hi, this is a 6-part tutorial series to teach you how to make your first platformer game in GameMaker. The goal of this tutorial is to teach you some tools and some skills that you can use to not only make platformer games, but other games as well. And thus far in our project, we've implemented all the mechanics, the jumping, the moving, the save points, the tutorial signs. We even have a title menu system in place and a camera system and everything. And in this last video, we're going to start learning about options menus and adjusting difficulty settings. And with that, you should be able to implement other menu screens if you'd like, and implement other options that you can allow players to adjust. Even though in this options menu, we will only be adjusting difficulty settings. So let's get started. So I happen to be a professor of digital media arts, and I research video games, disability, and accessibility. And I oftentimes argue in my research and also to my students that video game accessibility should meet a very basic standard that I call the ground floor of accessibility, which is input remapping, visual clarity, subtitles for all spoken language, and variable difficulty. So our game doesn't really have an issue with visual clarity because I've designed it visually to not have an issue. It has black background with the cyan or aqua color. It doesn't have any issue with subtitles for spoken language because there's no spoken language, so we don't need subtitles. But the game does need adjustable difficulty for players. And then with that tool, you should be able to figure out how to do button remapping yourself by using global variables and saving certain keys as global variables. So before we do anything else, let's do some housekeeping. First thing we're going to do is go to our title room creation code and remove the initialize script call right here. And instead, we're going to put that in our splash button. So go to objects, O button splash, not O button start, but O button splash. And in the step event, where it takes us to our title, we're going to add a line here that says initialize. Did I spell that right? I did. Initialize. So our splash button is where we're going to initialize all the global variables. And then we're going to add to our title creation code window set cursor CR default. Because we want to be able to see our mouse when we go to our title screen, and that used to be housed in the initialize script, but now since we removed it, we need to put it back. So when I hit escape, I see the mouse again. So that's all working. Okay, so now let's start with difficulty levels, and then we're going to implement it in the game, and you'll be done with this tutorial series. In the O player object, go to the step event, and we're going to completely remove the enemies region from the player object. We're going to handle everything in here from the enemy objects themselves. So I can just go here and I can just delete all of the enemies region entirely. There we go. And now we can go into O hazard. In a step event there, we can write if place meeting X, Y, O player, double close parentheses, open curly bracket, close curly brackets with O player. So it runs the code from the player object, death. So we run the death script that way. So I'm going to just copy that and open up O enemy in the step event, and I will place it at the end of the step event. Player death. So let's run the game, make sure it works. We touch a hazard, it works, and we gotta go touch an enemy to test it. It works. Now we need to make it so that if invincibility is turned on, it won't make the death script run anymore. So go to our initialize script. So go to scripts, initialize, and we're going to add some global variables. Global.invin, which stands for invincibility, underscore enemies equals false. And then global.invin underscore hazards equals false. Close out of that. And in the OHazard step event, wrap all of this in an if statement. I will write if bang global.invin underscore hazards. So if global.invin hazards is false, open curly bracket here, and then at the end of this, I will add a close curly bracket, highlight this and indent it. So if this is false, do everything normally. But if it is turned to true, it will then ignore this. I have a caution here. So what am I doing wrong? Unexpected syntax error. Oh, it's the two closed parentheses there. Yep. So it'll ignore this if this is turned to true. So to test this, all we have to do is go to our initialize script and change this invin hazards to true. And then now we should be able to touch hazards without dying. Yep, see? Perfectly safe now. So I'm going to turn that back to false. Now we're going to copy and paste that code. We're going to just copy and paste all of this back over to the enemy object. Go down where it says player death, highlight all of it to replace it, and then paste the exact same code as before. Now we're going to duplicate our start button. So highlight it, and I'm going to hit Control D or Command D on a Mac, or you can right click and find duplicate. And I'm going to call it O button invin hazards. I'm going to open that up to the create event. I'm going to remove where it sets the X position because we're going to need some more flexibility in where we place it in our options menu. And we're going to add some different variables. Off text equals off. On text equals on. If bang global.invin hazards, close parentheses, open curly brackets, close curly brackets, text equals off text, else text equals on text. And now in the step event, make this a little bigger. We're going to remove the load game and fade out code entirely from the mouse button if statement. So mouse button if statement. We still want the sound. We're just going to delete all of this right here. So we still have the mouse check button pressed, and then the sound effect. But underneath that, we can write something else instead. So a new if statement, if bang global dot invin hazards. So if invin hazards is false, close parentheses, open curly bracket, close curly bracket, else open curly bracket, close curly bracket. So when we click on this button, it's going to check to see if this is false. If it's false, it's going to do one thing, and if it's true, it's going to do something else. So indent here. If it's false, set global.invin hazards to true. And then set the text to equal on text. Else global.invin hazards equals false. Text equals off text. Go to the draw event and change the draw text code to just write text instead. And you can remove the quote marks because now we're using a string variable. So remove everything, including the quote marks, and just write text. So to test it, let's just add this button to the title screen. We're not going to make the options menu just yet. So open rooms, go to title, enter instances. I'm going to drag in this invincibility button over here. Load the game. So here it is, off. If I click it, it turns on, turns off. So let's make it off and start the game and touch the hazards. Okay, hit escape. I'm going to turn it on, initialize, touch the hazard. Now it's safe. So that is now working. I'm going to leave that there for now. We might need to remove it later. So now open that button again, back to the draw event, and we're going to add this to the end of the draw event. So after all of the hover button text and everything, we're going to write comment explain text. Draw set h-align far left this time. Draw set font to be F default. Draw set color to be C aqua. And then draw text is X plus 170. Y explain. And be sure now to go to the create event and add the explain variable to be, quote, invincibility to spikes, colon, and then that line break code that I taught you before, /n. Turn this option on if you don't, /n for new line break, want spikes to damage you, period, close quotes, semicolon. So let's test it. Okay, you can't really see it because we have the credits there, but the explanation text is there appropriately. But now that we know that it's working, we can now remove it from the title screen. So go to instances in the title screen and remove that Invin Hazards button. Let's now add an accessibility options screen that players can access from the title screen to turn these options on and off. So duplicate the title screen. So go to R title and duplicate it. And I'm going to call it R, I don't know, options. R options. Open that up. In the instances layer, remove the logo object and the credits object and the two buttons. In fact, I'm going to go to the tiles, libraries, auto tile, and I'm going to right click on these corners to remove it. So it's a little bit more, and I might even remove this border entirely, depending on how much room we have. Back to instances layer. So we need a button to get to the options screen. So let's close that. We're going to go to objects. And we're going to duplicate O button start again. Oh, didn't do it right. There we go. And I'm going to call this O button options. Open that up, go to step, and change this, remove this entirely. So after the sound effect, you just write fade out R options 0, 0, close parentheses, semicolon. So it'll just take us to the options screen and then go to the draw event and change this from initialize to options. Options. And before we even place it in the room, we're going to duplicate our options button. Duplicate, and I'm going to call this O button return to title. Open that up. In the create event, remove where it sets the X position because we want to put it in the top left corner. And then in the step event, change where it goes. So instead of our options, it's going to take us back to our title. And then go to the draw event and change text from options to return main. You can call this, you can say return to title or something. I'm just like keeping it on theme as being a cyberpunk programmy-esque vibe to the game. All right, now time to place the buttons. So open our title room, select the instances layer, and add the O button options button. So I'll add it there. Oh, not very much room, so I'm going to move these other buttons up. That should be about right. And then I'm going to open our options room, select instances, and I'm going to add the O button return to title. I'm going to put it in the top left corner there. Again, we might need to remove this because we might not have room for all the buttons, but we'll see. Click to begin, go to options, takes us here, return main, takes us back to the title. Takes us back and forth. All right, so, and we can add, oh yeah, also the hazard invincibility button. So we've added the select instances, we have the return to title button here. But now we can also add the invin hazards button and put it right underneath. I'm actually going to change the grid size of Y to 16 so we can just get a little bit closer. Okay, we have the button that we can turn off and on now. So it's very simple to make a button for invincibility to enemies now. All we have to do is duplicate O button invin hazards, call it O button invin enemies, open that up, and in the create event, change the explain text to be invincibility to enemies. Turn this option on if you don't want enemies to damage you. And change this global variable. Instead of checking for invin hazards, check for invin enemies. And then in the step event, change everything from hazards to enemies. So this says invin hazards, I'll say enemies. It says invin hazards, change it to enemies. Change this hazards to enemies. And now we can add it to that room. Our options, instances layer, O button, enemies, add that to the room too. Click to begin, options, turn both of these on, return to main, initialize, perfectly safe. If I go try to touch the enemy, I think it will also be perfectly safe. Hit escape, options, turn these both off, initialize, they're now dangerous again. Finally, let's add higher jumps and unlimited jumps to the options menu to also mitigate difficulty. So go to the initialize script, scripts, initialize. Let's add a couple more global variables. Global dot infinite jumps equals false. Global dot higher jumps equals false. Close that. Now duplicate our invin hazards button and call it O button infinite jumps. In the creation code, create event, change the explanation to say unlimited jumps. Turn this option on if you want to /n if you want to be able to jump around in the air. Also in the create event, change this to the appropriate global variable, infinite jumps, and then go to the step event and change all the global variables, infinite jumps, and I'm just going to copy that and paste it here, paste it here. Close that. And now we're going to duplicate the button we just made, the infinite jumps button. We are going to duplicate it and call it O button higher jumps. And do all the same things. Go to the create event. Change the explanation to say higher jumps. Turn this option on if you want to be able to jump higher than normal. Change this global variable. Instead of saying infinite jumps, change it to higher jumps. And I'm going to copy and paste this, or just copy it, so I can go easily to the step event and replace these with higher jumps, higher jumps, higher jumps. And now we're going to place both buttons in the options room. Instances layer, O button, higher jumps, I'll place first, and then O button, infinite jumps, I'll place after that. Oh, and it all fits because I changed the grid size, so it all fits nicely. So now we don't have code to actually make you jump higher yet, but I just want to check the options menu to see if all looks good. It does. So now let's add the code for jumping. Just go to the OPlayer step event. Go to calculate movement to the ground jump section. Ground jump. And we're going to wrap stuff in an if statement, so it's going to look a little different. I'm going to start right here, right underneath ground jump, add a new line and write if bang global dot infinite jumps, close parentheses, open curly bracket. And then I'm going to add the close curly bracket right here, I believe. Yes. Right at the end here. And then I'm going to take all of this stuff in the middle and indent it. So if infinite jumps is turned off, jumping works just normally, right? And I'm also going to add an else statement, or just else, open curly bracket, close curly bracket. So when this is turned on, things are just going to work a little different. If key jump, open curly bracket, close curly bracket, VSP equals jump speed, semicolon, and then just copy and paste this sound effect code so that the sound effect still works. If key jump, VSP equals jump speed, play the sound effect. And now that should work with infinite jumps. Now let's go to the create event and change max VSP to be a higher jump value. Even though our normal jump is going to be 12, I'm going to change this to 14 and change the jump speed line where it says jump speed equals -12. We're going to change this so it actually makes a check first. So if bang global dot higher jumps is false. So if global higher jumps is false, open curly bracket, close curly bracket, and we'll just put the regular jump speed line in there. So if it's turned off, just do the regular jump speed of -12. Else, meaning it's turned on, we'll set jump speed to be -14. All right, that should be it for the options menu, even though we need to adjust the save and load system now. But let's just make sure. Let's delete the save here. Let's turn on unlimited jumps and higher jumps. Start the game. Our jump is indeed much, much higher. And do we have infinite jumps? I do. So we can jump around in the air if we like, which is, I gotta say, super fun. You can design an entire game around that. In fact, somebody did. It's called Flappy Bird. Close that. Now we just need to be able to save the player's preferences from the options menu into the save file and the load game system so that the game remembers it. So when they reload the game after closing it, it just remembers all of their preferences. So close out of that player object. Let's go back to our save game script. Save game. And we're going to add a bunch of things. So right here we have the progress section written out. Let's write more. I write real. The section is going to be called difficulty, or you can call it options, but I'm just going to say difficulty. Comma, higher jumps. Oh, I need that in quote marks. Quote, higher jumps, comma, global dot, higher underscore jumps. And again, I write real difficulty infinite jumps, global dot infinite jumps. As you can see, there's a little drop-in menu sometimes when you're writing variable names, and you can just hit enter if it's the right one, and it fills in the rest. I write real difficulty, comma, invin enemies, global dot invin enemies. I write real difficulty, invin hazards, global dot invin hazards. Oh, all right. So that's our save game script. And now let's open our load game script. And we can actually make this a little easier. If we go to open up our load game script, yes, but also open our initialize script, and we just copy these difficulty options, copy, and go up here, new line, paste, properly indent them. And now we just got to fill in the I read real section stuff. So I read real difficulty, comma, invin enemies. Oh, needs to be in quote marks. Invin enemies, comma, and then the default value is just going to be false. And I'm going to copy that and paste it here, here, and here. And that way I don't have to rewrite difficulty. I'm going to change this to invin hazards, false. Call this infinite jumps. Infinite jumps, all one word. Call this one higher jumps, all one word. So that should all work now. And now we need to rearrange slightly where the script happens. So we want to load up the preferences before the player looks at the options menu. So let's close that and close that. So first, we're going to open up our load game script. And we're going to remove this fade out script from it. Just remove that entirely. And in the O button start step event, expand that a little. We're going to remove the load game script entirely and just have it fade out in the mouse button if statement. So it is going to look a little different. We're just going to remove all of this entirely, and we're just going to write fade out global dot checkpoint room global dot checkpoint x global dot checkpoint Y. So that's the start button. Fade out. Very good. And we're also going to go to the death script. And we're going to add a fade out after the load game script. So we removed fade out from load game, so now we need to add it manually. So after load game, we will write fade out global dot checkpoint room, global dot checkpoint X, global dot checkpoint Y. So now we'll have the load game script run right after the initialize script runs in the O button splash step event. So let's open O button splash. And we're going to place the load game script right after initialize. So initialize will declare all the variables, and then we'll add load game. And remember, with load game, we do a check to see if a save file exists. And if it doesn't exist, it doesn't do anything. So load game, we're actually going to do a check. After initialize, we'll write if file exists, save.sav. So never mind. Forget what I just said. Close parentheses, open curly brackets, close curly brackets. If there is a save file, it will load it. If not, it'll ignore this. And now we need to add our save game script to the button that returns from the options menu so it remembers what we decide in the options menu. So go to O button, return to title. So this takes us back to the title room from the options menu, and we will save the game in the step event right before we fade out. So I will write save game. So after we change options in there, it will save the game so it will remember our preferences. So we made a lot of changes now. So if we didn't mess anything up, everything should work properly. Okay. There's no save file. Go to options. Turn these on. There is now a save file from that return to title button. Initialize. Those options are now turned on. I hit escape key to go back here. I can go to options and it's all remembers, and I can hit delete save, go to options, they're all turned off. And congratulations, you have a working platformer game. From here, I would recommend building, maybe adding a button over here that would take you to another screen where you would allow players to remap their inputs so that they didn't just have to use the arrow keys or spacebar, but they can use any buttons that they choose. It's a great accessibility feature, and I trust that you'll be able to figure it out. Also, an older version of this tutorial series included button remapping, so you can always go look up the older version of this video from years past and see how I do it, but you should be able to figure it out using global variables and saving things to your save and load game scripts. But for now, you should have a working prototype of a platformer game, and I would recommend that you take this opportunity to try building a few levels, seeing if you can practice game design principles and make an interesting platformer experience with just the mechanics we have in this game. And then I would encourage you to go out and make your own games, not just platformer games, but any games using the tools that you learn in this tutorial series. Feel free to reach out to me if you have questions. You can locate my contact information on my website, skylorel.net. And I look forward to hearing from you. And stay tuned. I might upload other tutorials. See ya.